Me and my daughter were eating breakfast when she started falling asleep at the table. Is it the phone keeping you awake all night? I asked. Nicole sighed. No, Mom. I got a weekend job at Romano's. The shifts are from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., remember? I was proud of her, until 3 days later when I saw $4,000 had been deposited into her checking account. Nicole! I called her into the living room. Romano paid you $4,000? Her face went white, then red. Oh, that's not from work. It's from an essay contest that I won. That's amazing. Can I read it? They keep exclusive rights. I can't share it. She grabbed an apple and practically ran back to her room. That night at 1 a.m., I heard our garage door close. Nicole's car was gone. I texted asking where she was, and she responded that she was studying at Aaliyah's house for their calculus test. When she came home at 6:45 a.m. for breakfast, reeking of men's cologne, she looked exhausted. Late night studying? I asked. Yeah, calculus is brutal this year. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I called Aaliyah's mom Friday afternoon trying to sound casual. The girls have been studying so hard together lately. Really? Aaliyah mentioned they haven't hung out in weeks. Is everything okay? My stomach dropped. Yes, of course. I must have misunderstood. That weekend, Nicole came downstairs wearing a turtleneck in April. New style? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Yeah, dark academia aesthetic. It's a thing. When she reached for the orange juice, her sleeve listed and I saw these angry red scratches on her neck. She saw me looking and yanked the collar up. Aaliyah's cat is psycho, she said quickly. I drove to Romano's that Saturday night, and when I asked for my daughter, the manager looked at me like I was crazy. Nicole doesn't work here? I repeated, even though I'd heard him clearly. No, ma'am. We only hire family. The next morning was when everything shifted. Another $4,000 hit her account. That was $8,000 in 2 weeks. My 17-year-old daughter was making more than I made in a month. Mom, can I borrow your reading glasses? She asked that afternoon. Since when do you need glasses? I don't. I just need to look older for work stuff. She grabbed them before I could ask more questions. And when I found condoms in her purse, I knew I had to do something. On Friday night, I pretended to go to bed early. I heard her car leave at 11 p.m. and waited 5 minutes before following her. She drove toward Riverside where the hotels were, the ones that rented by the hour. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep them on the steering wheel. She pulled into Sunrise Senior Care Facility, the nursing home I used to work at. The security guard at the front desk smiled when I walked in. Are you here to see Nancy? She's doing med rounds on 2. I froze. Nancy was my name. I just smiled and said yes. I rushed to the second floor and found my daughter in scrubs, wearing my reading glasses, pushing a medication cart down the hall. Her clipboard hit the floor. Mom. An elderly man poked his head out of a room. Everything all right, Nancy dear? Yes, Mr. Rob. Just give me a minute. Her voice was professional, calm. She pulled me into an empty break room and closed the door. Her hands were shaking. I've been working here for 4 months. As what? You're 17 years old. I'm a nurse. I use your old license, Mom. They never checked. They were desperate for overnight staff and... You're committing fraud, identity theft. These residents could die. I studied. I watched YouTube videos. I learned all the medications. The residents love me. Mr. Rob only lets me help him with his insulin. Miss Lee says I'm better than... Why? My voice cracked. Why would you risk everything? Nicole's face crumbled. She reached into her scrubs pocket and pulled out a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. My legs went weak. Who? The word came out as a whisper. It's Mr. Doran's. The name sounded familiar. He said I was special. Nicole was sobbing now. He loves me. His wife doesn't understand him like I do. He told me I'm so mature for my age. The words made my blood run cold. He said if I could prove I was adult enough to support myself, to take care of a baby, he'd leave his wife when I turn 18. He checks my bank account, makes sure I'm saving enough for our future. The pieces finally clicked. Mr. Doran was the assistant principal. Nicole, he's 55 years old. She broke down crying. I grabbed her shoulders and looked around the empty break room, checking that no one else was listening. Nicole's whole body was shaking, and she kept wiping her nose with the sleeve of her scrubs. The pregnancy test was still in her hand, and I took it from her, shoving it in my pocket before anyone could walk in and see it. My mind was racing with 1,000 questions, but I knew we had to get out of this place right now. Nicole pulled away from me and started pacing back and forth, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. Mom, I can't just leave, she said, her voice cracking. Mr. Rob needs his insulin at 2, and Miss Lee hasn't had her evening meds yet. I watched my daughter wipe her face with a paper towel and straighten her scrubs, trying to pull herself together. She was right about the residents needing care, but we couldn't stay here another minute. I told her we'd call the supervisor from the car, and she nodded, grabbing her clipboard from where it had fallen. We walked out of the break room, and Nicole went to each room, checking on the residents one more time. Mr. Rob was already asleep, but Miss Lee called out asking for her pills. Nicole told her another nurse would be there soon, and squeezed the old woman's hand. I waited by the elevator, my legs feeling weak, watching my daughter say goodbye to people who thought she was me. The security guard waved as we left, and I forced myself to smile back. In the parking lot, Nicole's hands were shaking so bad she dropped her keys twice. I took them from her and unlocked her car, then remembered I'd driven here too. We decided to leave my car and come back for it later. Nicole sat in the passenger seat and I handed her my phone, making her call the night supervisor. She cleared her throat and reported a family emergency, saying she had to leave immediately. The supervisor sounded annoyed but said she'd send an agency nurse within the hour. Nicole hung up and slumped in her seat, pulling her knees up to her chest. The drive home was silent except for Nicole's sniffling. About halfway there, she started talking in this flat voice about how Mr. Doran checks her bank account every single week. He makes her show him the balance on her phone to prove she's saving enough money. He told her if she can save $20,000 by her 18th birthday, it'll prove she's responsible enough to raise their baby. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. This man had been controlling every part of my daughter's life and I hadn't even noticed. Nicole kept talking about how he helped her set up direct deposit at the nursing home and how he calculated exactly how much she needed to save each month. When we got home, I made Nicole sit at the kitchen table while I made us both tea. My hands were still shaking as I set the mugs down. I tried to explain that what Mr. Doran was doing wasn't love, that a 55-year-old man pursuing a teenager was wrong. Nicole just stared at her tea and kept saying I didn't understand. She said he was the only person who really saw her potential, who treated her like an adult. She said his wife was cold and didn't appreciate him. I wanted to scream, but I kept my voice steady, asking her when this all started. Nicole said it began with tutoring sessions after school for her AP history class. He'd noticed she was struggling and offered to help. Then the sessions turned into coffee meetings and then dinners. She thought she was special because the assistant principal was paying attention to her. After about an hour of going in circles, Nicole said she needed a shower. I heard the water running and quietly picked up her phone from the table. Her passcode was still her birthday, and I got in easily. My stomach turned as I scrolled through hundreds of messages from Doran. He called her his angel, his future, his reason for living. There were messages about their plans to move away together once she graduated, screenshots of houses he wanted to buy for them, pictures she'd sent him that made me want to throw the phone against the wall. I forced myself to screenshot everything, sending it all to my email. The bank app showed every deposit, $4,000 exactly, twice a week for the past 2 months. There were also smaller amounts, 500 here, 300 there, all from the same routing number. I looked up the number and it came from a personal checking account, not the nursing home. Doran was paying her directly. When the shower stopped, I put the phone back exactly where it was. Nicole came downstairs in her pajamas, her eyes red and puffy. She grabbed an apple from the counter and went straight to her room without saying anything. I sat at my desk with a notepad, writing down everything that could go wrong. Nicole could be arrested for identity fraud and practicing nursing without a license. I could lose my nursing license forever for not securing my credentials. The nursing home could sue us both. And if we reported Doran, he could destroy us with what he knew. But if we didn't report him, he'd keep controlling my daughter. The next morning, I knocked on Nicole's door at 7. She was already awake, sitting on her bed with her laptop. I told her she wasn't going to the school alone anymore. Either she came with me to get help or she stayed home, but there was no way I was letting her near that man without me there. We argued for 20 minutes before agreeing to go together, but arrived late, after I figured out who at the school we could trust. Nicole got dressed in jeans and a hoodie, covering the scratches on her neck. We drove to the school in silence and I parked in the visitor lot. As we walked toward the building, Nicole grabbed my arm and pointed. Doran was standing by the main entrance talking to a group of students. He was smiling and laughing like nothing was wrong. Nicole's breathing got fast and shallow. She was having a panic attack right there in the parking lot. I turned us around immediately and got her back in the car. Her whole body was shaking and she kept saying she couldn't breathe. I drove around to the side of the building where the administrative offices had a separate entrance. The counselor's office had a sign saying closed for district training. I signed Nicole out at the attendance desk, saying she had a medical appointment. Back in the car, I called the number I'd found online for a sexual assault hotline. The woman who answered was calm and patient, asking if I was safe and if the victim was with me. I explained the situation while Nicole stared out the window. The advocate gave me names of therapists who specialized in teen victims of grooming. She explained our reporting options and the legal protections available. She said what Doran did was a crime regardless of what Nicole thought about their relationship. She emailed me a packet of resources and said we could call back anytime. I hung up and started calling around for appointments while Nicole sat silent in the passenger seat. The first OB office had an opening that afternoon at 3 and I grabbed it. Then I Googled detectives who handled these kinds of cases and found one named Cormac Marshall who worked with teen victims. His secretary said he could see us tomorrow morning. Between calls, I pulled out a notebook from my glove compartment and started writing down everything I could remember. When did the late nights start? When did she first mention Romano's? When did the money start showing up? My hand was shaking, so bad I could barely read my own writing. Nicole watched me write and her face got paler with every line. We drove home in silence and she went straight to her room while I kept making calls. I left her phone on the kitchen counter where I could see it. Around 6 that evening, I heard the shower running upstairs. I was making dinner when I noticed her phone wasn't on the counter anymore. My stomach dropped. I ran upstairs and could hear her voice through the bathroom door even with the water running. She was talking fast and quiet, and I pressed my ear against the door. She was telling someone she'd meet them tomorrow after school. Her voice sounded weird, like she wasn't sure about what she was saying. The shower turned off and I backed away from the door. When she came out in her pajamas, I was standing there holding out my hand. She knew what I wanted and handed over the phone without a word. I checked the call log and saw she'd called a number I didn't recognize. But when I hit redial, it went straight to voicemail. Doran's voice on the recording made my skin crawl. I looked at the call history again, and she'd already deleted it once, but the phone company app still showed it. She grabbed for the phone, but I pulled it away. That's when the screaming started. She called me controlling and crazy and said I was ruining her life. She said Doran understood her and I was just jealous because nobody wanted me. The words stung, but I kept the phone. She tried to push past me toward the stairs, and I had to physically block the doorway. She was crying and hitting my arms trying to get through. I held my ground even though my heart was breaking. She finally gave up and slammed her bedroom door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I sat outside her door for an hour listening to her cry. Around midnight, I thought she'd finally fallen asleep, so I went to bed. I woke up at 2 when I heard a thud outside. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I ran to Nicole's room and found her window open and her bed empty. My hands were shaking as I opened the phone tracking app on my laptop. The little dot showed her 3 miles away at a gas station on Route 9. I threw on shoes and drove there going 20 over the speed limit. I found her sitting on the curb next to the dumpsters with her knees pulled up to her chest. She was wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, and her face was red from crying. She looked up when she heard my car and didn't fight when I opened the passenger door. She got in without saying anything, and we sat there in the parking lot for 5 minutes before I started driving home. Neither of us had any energy left to fight. Back at the house, we sat at the kitchen table and I made her hot chocolate like when she was little. She held the mug with both hands and finally said she'd try therapy, but only if nobody at the school found out. I agreed immediately. We were both so tired we could barely keep our eyes open. But we'd found some kind of truce. She went to bed and I waited until I heard her breathing get deep and regular before I picked up my phone. I called the nursing home's HR department even though it was 3 in the morning. The voicemail greeting was cheerful and professional and completely wrong for what I had to say. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them my daughter had been using my old license without my permission. I explained she'd been working there for months pretending to be me. My voice cracked when I said I knew this could end my career, but I needed them to know. I left my number and hung up. The next morning I heard Nicole moving around in her room. I knocked and asked if she wanted breakfast, but she said no. I could hear papers rustling and then crying. I realized she was reading through the packet the hotline had emailed us. The list of warning signs for grooming was long and detailed. Through the door, I could hear her sobbing, and I knew she was checking off every box. Age differences, secrecy, financial control, isolation from friends, promises about the future. It was all there in black and white. I left her alone and drove to the police station for my appointment with Detective Marshall. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a calm voice. I handed him a folder with all the screenshots I'd taken from Nicole's phone, the bank records showing the deposits, the text messages about their future, the photos she'd sent him. He looked through everything carefully and took notes. He explained that teacher-student relationships were illegal regardless of what Nicole thought about consent. He said 17 was still a minor and Doran's position made it worse. He asked if Nicole would talk to him, and I said maybe, but not today. He gave me his card and said to call anytime. That afternoon, I drove Nicole to her OB appointment. Dr. Kim was gentle and professional and didn't judge. She did an exam and confirmed Nicole was 8 weeks pregnant. She went through all the options without pushing any direction. She talked about prenatal care, adoption, and termination. Nicole held my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. Her whole body was shaking. Dr. Kim gave us pamphlets and said to take time to think. She scheduled a follow-up for next week. We were walking to the car when my phone rang. Chelsea Chavez from the nursing home's HR department sounded panicked. She wanted to meet immediately and kept saying words like liability and investigation and vetting process. She asked if I could come in tomorrow morning. She said she was worried about the residents and needed to know exactly what happened. I said yes and hung up. Nicole looked at me and I could see she understood what that call meant. Everything was falling apart, but at least the truth was finally coming out. That evening I found Nicole at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere, going through a checklist the hotline had sent about relationship warning signs. She was marking boxes with a red pen, her hand shaking as she checked off love bombing, isolation from friends, age gap minimization, future promises, financial monitoring, secrecy demands, and making her prove her maturity. When she finished, she had marked 23 out of 25 boxes, and she pushed the paper toward me with tears running down her face. The next morning, the school called and asked me to come in immediately. Melinda Goodwin, the counselor, was waiting in her office with a concerned look and a notepad. She said Nicole had missed too many days and teachers were worried, so I took a deep breath and told her everything about Doran, the pregnancy, the grooming, and watched her face go pale. She started writing fast, explaining she was a mandated reporter and had to file this immediately, but promised she would protect Nicole during the investigation. 3 days later, a flower delivery truck pulled up to our house and the driver left a huge bouquet on our porch with no card attached. Nicole saw them through the window and went white because she recognized Doran's handwriting on the envelope tucked between the roses. Her whole body started shaking, and she kept saying he knew she wasn't at the school. He was watching us. He knew where we lived. I threw the flowers in the trash and called the lawyer Detective Marshall had recommended. Tyrone Ainsworth met with us that afternoon in his downtown office and went through our legal situation carefully. He said we needed to cooperate with all investigations, but Nicole had to stop any work at the nursing home immediately. No more shifts even to say goodbye. He explained our legal exposure was serious with the identity fraud, but Nicole's age and the grooming situation would work in our favor with prosecutors. That night, Nicole sat on her bed with her phone in her hands for an hour, typing and deleting messages to Doran. She finally wrote that she needed space to think about everything, and stared at the send button for 20 minutes before putting the phone down without sending it. It was the first time since this started that she hadn't responded to him right away. 2 days later, Melinda Goodwin called to tell me Doran had been placed on administrative leave while they investigated, and rumors were already spreading through the school about him and a student. I felt relief that he was away from the kids, but also dread about what would happen when people found out it was Nicole. The next Monday, Nicole tried going back to classes, but lasted only 2 hours. She kept texting me from the bathroom that she could hear whispers in every hallway about Doran and some girl, theories about who it might be, jokes about teachers' pets. She said she wanted to drop out and never go back, and I could feel how alone she was in that building. I had to meet with Chelsea at the nursing home that Wednesday morning for the HR investigation. She admitted they had never properly verified credentials when they hired Nicole because they were so desperate for night staff, and now they were proposing an internal review of everyone. I insisted they needed to be transparent about resident safety during Nicole's shifts, and she agreed to audit all the care records and medication logs from the past 4 months. Nicole's first therapy appointment with Sinead Rawlings was that Friday afternoon. I drove her there and waited in the car for the full hour, watching the clock and hoping this would help. When she came out, her eyes were red and puffy, but something in her posture seemed lighter, like she had put down a heavy bag she'd been carrying. Sinead had focused on establishing safety and helping Nicole process the grief for the relationship she thought she had versus what it really was. Detective Marshall called that evening to update us on the investigation. He said they were seeking a search warrant for Doran's electronic devices, including his school computer, personal laptop, and phone. He recommended we file for a temporary restraining order immediately because the digital evidence would take time to process, but we needed protection now. The paperwork for the restraining order was thick and detailed, requiring dates and times and specific incidents. Nicole and I spent hours going through her phone together, documenting every text, every meeting, every gift, every promise he had made about their future. She had to write out how the relationship started, that first time in his office when she was upset about a failing grade and he comforted her. Reading her words made me sick, but I kept my face calm for her sake. Tyrone filed the emergency order the next morning and got us a hearing date for the following week. Nicole was getting more anxious about facing Doran in court, but Sinead was helping her prepare mentally for seeing him again. The investigation was moving faster than any of us expected, with the school district taking it seriously once Melinda's report hit their desks. More flowers showed up 2 days later, this time with a card that just said, "Thinking of you," in his handwriting, and we photographed everything before calling the police to document the contact attempt. Nicole was starting to see the pattern of control more clearly, how he would push boundaries and then act romantic to pull her back in. That evening, Nicole's phone buzzed while we were clearing dinner plates and her face went white when she read it. She handed me the phone without saying anything, and I saw Doran's name at the top of the message. He was threatening to call the police about the nursing home fraud if she didn't meet him tomorrow at the park. My hand started shaking as I read it 3 more times. Nicole was watching my face, and for the first time since this started, she wasn't defending him or making excuses. She grabbed my hand and said she was scared. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to Tyrone right away. He called back within 10 minutes and told us this was exactly what we needed for the restraining order. The threat showed clear coercion and harassment. Nicole sat next to me on the couch while I typed up everything Tyrone needed for the emergency filing. The next morning, Tyrone met us at the courthouse at 8 sharp with all the paperwork ready. Nicole signed where he showed her, and I watched her hands shake as she wrote her name. The clerk said we'd get a hearing date within the week and gave us temporary papers. Tyrone explained that Doran couldn't come within 500 feet of Nicole or contact her in any way. On the drive home, Nicole kept checking her phone even though Doran was blocked. She said she felt nervous about the court date and facing him. I told her we'd prepare with Sinead, and she nodded but kept biting her nails. 2 days later, Nicole went back to the school to take a makeup calculus test she'd missed. I waited in the parking lot and she texted me that she was heading to the office. 20 minutes later, she called me crying so hard I couldn't understand her. I ran into the building and found her hyperventilating in the bathroom. She managed to tell me that Doran's wife was in the office volunteering and had looked right at her. Nicole was convinced everyone would find out now. Her whole body was shaking and she couldn't catch her breath. I helped her to the car and she sobbed the whole way home. That afternoon, I called the school and told them Nicole couldn't come back right now. The principal understood and said they could arrange home instruction to keep her on track for graduation. I filled out the paperwork that same day, and they said a teacher would start coming to the house next week. The guilt hit me hard watching Nicole isolated from normal teenage life. She should be going to prom and hanging out with friends, not hiding at home. But her safety had to come first, even if it meant missing everything. Over the next few days, Nicole had long talks with Dr. Kim about her options. She also spent hours in therapy with Sinead working through everything. I gave them privacy, but I could hear Nicole crying through the door sometimes. On the fourth day, she came out of her room and told me she'd made a decision. She wanted to terminate the pregnancy. Her voice was steady, but I saw conflict in her eyes. She said she wasn't ready to be a mom and definitely not with his baby. Dr. Kim scheduled the appointment for the following week and went over everything with Nicole. I watched my daughter sign the consent forms with a steady hand, though her leg was bouncing under the table. That night, I went online and started pricing my grandmother's jewelry that I'd kept in the safe. The legal fees were adding up fast, and insurance wouldn't cover the procedure. I also listed some furniture we didn't really need. Nicole came downstairs and saw me taking photos of the dining room chairs. She started crying and apologizing for ruining everything. I held her while she sobbed about the money and the mess she'd made. The next morning in therapy, Nicole finally told Sinead the whole truth about how it started. She said the first time happened in Doran's office after school when she was crying about a bad grade. He had comforted her and told her she was special, and then things went further. Sinead helped her understand that being vulnerable didn't mean she consented to anything. She explained how the power dynamic made real consent impossible. Nicole seemed to finally get it and cried for most of the session. Detective Marshall called that afternoon with an update on the investigation. He said Doran was denying everything, but they were waiting on digital forensics from his devices. The warrant had gone through and they'd seized his school computer and personal electronics. He stressed that Nicole's bank records showing the deposits and all her text messages were crucial evidence. He said the timeline would prove everything once they analyzed his devices. That night, Nicole woke up screaming from a nightmare and came to my room shaking. She sat on my bed for a long time before speaking. Then she told me about a hidden app on her phone with more evidence. She gave me the password but couldn't look at me while explaining what was in there. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said Doran made her send things. I opened the app with shaking hands and found dozens of messages I hadn't seen before. Doran talked constantly about their future together after she turned 18. He described the house they'd live in and the babies they'd have. There were photos too that he'd requested as proof of her love for him. The grooming evidence was overwhelming and I had to run to the bathroom to throw up. When I came back, Nicole was curled up in my bed crying and I held her until she fell asleep. The morning of the appointment came too fast and Nicole was sitting on her bed doing these breathing exercises where she counted to 4, held for 4, then let it out for 4. Sinead had taught her this to manage panic attacks and she was using it now while getting dressed. I made her toast even though she couldn't eat before the procedure, but she needed something normal to focus on besides what was coming. The clinic was 40 minutes away, and Nicole gripped my hand the whole drive, squeezing harder when we passed the high school. In the waiting room, she filled out the paperwork with steady hands while I watched other women coming and going, some alone, some with partners or mothers like me. Nicole squeezed my hand so hard when they called her name that I thought she might break my fingers, but I squeezed back just as hard. While she was in the procedure room, my phone rang, and it was Chelsea from the nursing home's HR department calling about their investigation. She explained they were putting in a whole new system where they'd verify every single credential with the state board before anyone could work a shift. She needed me to sign some cooperation agreements and said the nursing board was reviewing my case separately, but the home wasn't pressing charges since no residents were harmed. I agreed to everything, even though signing those papers felt like watching my career slip away forever. When they brought Nicole back to recovery, she was gripping my hand through the cramping, her face pale but determined not to cry. The nurse explained the aftercare while Nicole squeezed my fingers through each wave of pain. She didn't say much in the car ride home, just stared out the window. But when we got to the house, she looked lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted even through the physical pain. I called out sick for the next 2 days and turned off my phone except for checking it once an hour in case of emergencies. Nicole slept most of the first day while I sat in the chair by her bed bringing her heating pads and pain medicine every 4 hours. We watched old movies on my laptop, stuff we used to watch when she was little like The Princess Bride and Shrek, not talking about anything serious, just existing together in the quiet. On the second day, Nicole felt good enough to sit at the kitchen table, and that's when she took out her phone and started deleting things. She showed me as she deleted Doran's contact, then blocked 6 different numbers she thought might be him trying to reach her. She did it like some kind of ritual, pressing each delete button with purpose, taking back control one screen at a time. That same afternoon, an email popped up in her school account, and her face went white when she saw the sender. Doran had sent her a poem about their love being eternal, and how she'd understand when she was older that what they had was special. I grabbed the phone and forwarded it straight to Tyrone and Detective Marshall before Nicole could delete it in panic. Tyrone called within an hour saying this was perfect evidence of violating the restraining order since he wasn't supposed to contact her through any means including school email. The next morning, Nicole sat at her desk for 3 hours writing this long letter to herself about what really happened, versus what she thought was happening at the time. She wrote about how he made her feel special and was chosen but also scared and trapped, how she confused control with love because she didn't know better. She brought it to her therapy session that afternoon and read the whole thing to Saneed, crying through parts but pushing through to the end. Saneed said this was huge progress in processing the grief of losing not just the relationship, but her innocence about what love really means. 2 days later, Tyrone had us come to his office to prepare for the upcoming testimony, and he didn't sugarcoat how ugly it might get. He explained the defense would probably try to paint Nicole as a troubled teen who pursued a respected educator, maybe bring up the nursing home fraud to make her look like a habitual liar. Nicole practiced telling her story calmly, keeping to the facts about the office visits, the money, the pregnancy pressure, all while Tyrone threw harder and harder questions at her. She only broke down once when he asked if she'd encouraged the relationship, and I wanted to punch him even though I knew he was just preparing her. That weekend, we went grocery shopping at the store near the nursing home because everywhere else felt too close to the school people. Nicole was picking out apples when this old man touched her shoulder gently, and she turned to find Mr. Rob with a woman who must have been his daughter. Nicole's face crumpled and she started apologizing for lying to him, for pretending to be someone she wasn't, but Mr. Rob just patted her hand gently. He said he knew something was wrong because real nurses don't cry in the break room after giving insulin shots, but she took good care of him anyway. His daughter thanked Nicole for being gentle with her father even while dealing with whatever she was going through. We left the store quickly after that, but Nicole seemed relieved that at least one person from that mess didn't hate her. Monday morning, the school sent out an email blast with the most neutral statement possible about investigating a personnel matter and reminding everyone about appropriate boundaries. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up with texts from other parents asking if I knew what was going on. By lunch, social media was exploding with theories and accusations, some saying a teacher was sleeping with students, others claiming it was all lies for attention. I deleted our Facebook accounts, made our Instagram private, and told Nicole to stay off everything while this played out because the comments were getting vicious even without names being mentioned. That night, Nicole sat at her desk for 3 hours straight, filling page after page in her journal. I could hear her pen scratching across the paper from the hallway. She wrote about how she thought it was love, but now she could see all the ways he controlled her. She kept crossing things out and starting over like she was trying to get the words exactly right. When she finally came downstairs, her eyes were red, but she seemed calmer somehow. She showed me one page where she'd written that she was scared to face him, but ready to tell the truth. The next morning, we drove to the courthouse in silence, except for Nicole tapping her fingers on her knee. The waiting room had these hard plastic chairs that made my back hurt immediately. Through the glass doors, I could see Doran and his lawyer in another waiting area down the hall. My chest got so tight I thought I might throw up. Nicole grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. She seemed steadier than I expected, which made me feel both proud and sad. When they called us into the courtroom, Nicole walked straight to the witness stand without looking at Doran once. The judge was this older woman with gray hair who looked tired already. Nicole started talking about how it all began with him calling her special and mature for her age. She explained how he made her get the nursing job to prove she could support herself and a baby. Her voice stayed clear and strong while she showed the judge all the text messages we'd printed out. She talked about the money he made her save and how he checked her bank account every week. The only time her voice shook was when she had to describe the first time in his office after school. She said he locked the door and told her this was their secret and that adults wouldn't understand their connection. The defense lawyer stood up and started asking about the nursing home fraud, trying to make Nicole look like a liar. He kept pushing about how she'd deceived elderly residents and stolen my identity for months. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood to keep from yelling at him. The judge cut him off and said they were here about the restraining order, not other matters. She looked through all the evidence again, including the poems and the threats about reporting the fraud. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, she granted the restraining order with no contact allowed, including through third parties or social media. Doran's face turned bright red and he started to say something, but his lawyer grabbed his arm and made him sit down. Nicole reached for my hand under the table and held on tight. Outside the courthouse, Detective Marshall was waiting by his car with a folder under his arm. He told us the DA would review everything once the device forensics came back from Doran's phone and computer. He seemed pretty confident they'd find more evidence, but warned us the criminal case could take months to build. Nicole nodded like she understood, but I could see her starting to shake now that it was over. We got home and she went straight to bed without eating anything. She slept for 14 hours straight, and I kept checking on her to make sure she was still breathing. Saneed called that evening to do a phone session since Nicole was too exhausted to go to the office. I could hear Nicole crying through her bedroom door while they talked about how intense it was seeing Doran again. 2 days later, an official letter came from the nursing board about investigating my license misuse. They noted that I'd self-reported, which would help my case, but they still had to do a full review. Tyrone called after I forwarded him the letter and said he thought we could avoid criminal charges if I accepted probation terms. It wasn't great, but at least I could keep working, which we desperately needed for money. Nicole started her home instruction program that week with a teacher coming to the house 3 days a week. She actually finished her first math and English assignments on time, which felt like a small miracle. The teacher said Nicole was catching up quickly despite missing so much school. I watched her working at the kitchen table, and for the first time in months, she looked like a regular teenager doing homework. Tyrone spent hours on the phone with the nursing board going back and forth about terms. They wanted a 2-year probation with monthly check-ins and mandatory continuing education credits. He argued that given Nicole's victimization and my cooperation, they should reduce it to 1 year. After 3 rounds of negotiations, they agreed to 18 months of probation instead of prosecution. I had to sign papers accepting responsibility and agreeing to supervision, but I could keep my license and keep working. Nicole was sitting next to me when I signed, and she kept apologizing for ruining my career. I told her none of this was her fault, but I could see she didn't really believe me yet. That first night after signing the papers, Nicole actually slept past sunrise without waking up once. I heard her alarm go off at 7, and then the sound of her feet padding to the bathroom instead of the usual tossing and turning I'd gotten used to hearing through the walls. She came downstairs with her phone in her hand and showed me a text she'd typed to Aaliyah, admitting she'd been lying about studying together and apologizing for using her as an excuse. Her thumb hovered over the send button for a few seconds before she pressed it. Within minutes, Aaliyah texted back with 3 heart emojis and asked if she could drop off the homework Nicole had been missing. Nicole smiled for real for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, Chelsea called from the nursing home while I was making lunch. She explained they'd brought in an outside auditing firm to verify every single employee's credentials and implemented a new system requiring 2 forms of ID verification plus direct confirmation with licensing boards. She mentioned that during the audit, several residents had asked about me, especially Mr. Rob, who wanted to make sure I was doing okay after my family emergency. I told her to thank him for his concern and hung up feeling guilty about the deception, even though it wasn't really my fault. Nicole spent that afternoon going through her phone deleting things. I watched her remove the calculator app that wasn't really a calculator, but opened to a hidden photo vault when you typed in a special code. She showed me as she deleted every single photo and message stored there, then uninstalled the app completely. She created a new email address with just her first and middle name, no numbers or weird symbols, and started fresh with a new Instagram account that was set to private. The 2-week checkup with Dr. Kim came faster than expected. Nicole sat on the exam table swinging her legs while the doctor checked her over and confirmed she was healing well physically. Nicole asked about birth control options, and we spent 20 minutes discussing different methods and what would work best for her body and lifestyle. She chose the implant because she wouldn't have to remember to take anything daily, and Dr. Kim scheduled her to come back once her body had fully recovered. That Thursday's therapy session with Sinead was different from the others. Nicole sat up straight instead of curling into herself, and when Sinead asked her to describe what happened with Doran, Nicole said the word grooming, without immediately adding that maybe she'd led him on, or that she should have known better. Sinead's face lit up, and she told Nicole this was huge progress, that being able to name what happened without taking blame was a major breakthrough. I could see Nicole's shoulders relax like a weight had lifted. I spent the weekend writing my reflective statement for the nursing board, explaining how Nicole had accessed my old license without my knowledge, while acknowledging I should have secured my credentials better. I detailed the circumstances that led to the situation, and accepted responsibility for the lapse in safeguarding my professional documents. Monday morning, I submitted it along with all the required documentation, and by Wednesday, they'd approved my probation terms, allowing me to keep my license with monthly supervision check-ins. 3 weeks after the restraining order hearing, Nicole felt ready to try going back to the school for morning classes. Melinda had worked with the administration to create a safety plan that included Nicole parking in the staff lot near the main office, using specific hallways to avoid Doran's usual areas, even though he was still on leave and having permission to leave any class if she felt overwhelmed. Her first day back, she texted me every hour letting me know she was okay. A few teachers who knew the situation quietly checked on her between classes, and one moved her seat closer to the door without making a big deal about it. By the end of the week, she was managing 3 morning classes and keeping up with the afternoon work through her home instructor. Time moved differently after that, some days crawling and others flying by. 3 months after that terrible night at the nursing home when everything came crashing down, Nicole and I sat at our kitchen table eating scrambled eggs and toast. She was telling me about her calculus homework without any lies underneath the words. Detective Marshall had called the previous week to update us that the forensic analysis of Doran's devices had uncovered extensive evidence, including messages to other students over the years, though Nicole's case was the most severe. The DA was building a strong criminal case with multiple charges, including sexual assault of a minor and abuse of position of authority. Nicole was eating actual meals again instead of picking at her food, and she'd gained back most of the weight she'd lost during those months of secrets. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aaliyah about their weekend plans to see a movie. Real plans this time with no lies needed. Our home felt safe again, even though we both carried scars from everything that had happened. Nicole was getting stronger every day, learning to trust herself again and rebuilding her life piece by piece. All right, friends, that's a wrap for this story. I hope it left you smiling as much as it did me. Stick around, I've always got more heartwarming moments to share. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.